Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com, and we are here today with lesson number 31 on learning how to program the Arduino microprocessor. As I've explained in some of our more recent videos, what we're going to start doing now is we're going to start developing some more advanced programming techniques. And as I went back and looked over all of our earlier lessons, we've never talked about arrays. And so I think that we need to really take a lesson today and learn how to use Arduino arrays and learn how to effectively utilize them in our program. So first of all, what is an array? Well, an array is like a variable, and we've used variables before. When we use variables, what do we need to do? We need to declare them before we use them. So if we're going to write a simple program that blinks an LED, maybe a variable that we would use would be numBlink. That's how many times we want to blink it, or LED pin for the pin that the LED is connected to, or maybe blink speed, things like that. Think numbers that the program needs, we put in variables. A variable is like a bucket. The bucket has a label on it. That label might be numBlink, and then that bucket has a number in it. You can put a number in it like 12. You put 12 in it, then you can go and you can blink 12 times, or you could put 3 in it. But when you put 3 in it, you lose the 12. Okay, so a normal variable is like a bucket that can hold one number at a time, or one string at a time. Okay, I want you to think about other applications as we start thinking further along. What if you wanted to average grades? Okay, what if you wanted to average a list of grades? Well, in that case, you might have 3 grades, you might have 7 grades, you might have 26 grades. But what would you want to do? You would want to add all the grades together and then divide by the number of grades, num grades. Okay, how would we do that with an Arduino? Well, if we had 3 grades, maybe we would need the variable grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. But what if we had 17 grades? Then we need grade 1, grade 2, blah, 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 down to grade 17. So you see, all of a sudden, the program code depends on the special circumstances, and you can't really have that because a user, he doesn't want to go in and mess with your code. He just wants it to average the grades. So what would you like? You would like a variable that would hold more than one number, and that's what an array is. The way to think of an array is it's not just a bucket that you can put one number in at a time, but it's a bucket, and that bucket has slots, and you can have multiple slots. How many slots can you have? You have the number of slots that you declare when you declare the variable. So you declare the variable, you tell it it's an int or a float or a string, just like before, but then you tell it how many slots you want. So in your bucket, instead of one big bucket, think of that bucket separated into slots, and you could put a number in the first slot, the second slot, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. How many slots are there? That's defined by when you declare the variable. Okay, so on grades then we would have this bucket. The bucket has a bunch of different slots in it. We'd put the first grade in the first slot, the second grade in the second slot, the third grade in the third slot. Okay, so let's kind of get into this by just writing a simple program, and you guys play along at home. Okay, if you haven't already, get your coffee. I apologize, I've been talking a lot, so I'm a little bit hoarse, but that's not going to slow me down. I am still going to make this video. Okay, so fire up your most excellent Arduino IDE, and let's think. Okay, we want to write a program that averages a list of grades. We don't know how many grades are going to be in that list. One person might have 5 grades, another person 20 grades, so we've got to kind of leave that flexibility, but as the programmer we've got to put some limit on the number of grades. And so let's say that we're going to limit you to 25 grades. Now that doesn't mean that you have to use all 25 slots, but that means when we define the variable grades, we're going to have 25 slots that you can use. You can use as many of them or all of them if you want. So if we wanted to average grades, let's think about what variables we would need. Okay, first of all, and obviously, we would need grades. And grades isn't going to be a simple bucket. It's going to be a bucket with what? Slots. And therefore, it's going to be an array. So what would we do? Well, we also got to think of what type of variable would it be. Would it be an integer or a float? Well, could you have a grade of 93.5? You could. So we better make the variable a float. So we're going to say float. It lights up, meaning that it recognizes it. And then what are we going to call this variable? Grades. All right. Now, we don't want to just hold one grade. We want this variable to have slots in it. We want it to be an array. How do we tell it an array? Well, we're going to use an open square bracket. Now we tell it how many slots do we want in this variable. Let's say 25. That should be all that anybody would need. If somebody needed 100, you could change this to something else. Boom. What have we just done? We said we have a new variable. It's called grades. Has 25 slots in it. And down later I'll tell you how to select the slot. Like when you put a grade, you've got to tell it which slot you're going to put it in. Okay. Now what else do you need to know? Well, if you're going to be working with this, you got to know how many grades you have. Now, could you have 3.5 grades? No. The number of grades, therefore, would be a round number. Therefore, we need to declare it as an int. Does this need to be a simple variable or an array? It needs to be a simple variable because it's like num grades is num grades. It's the number of grades. It's one number. So we're going to call that num grades. What else would we need? We're calculating what? We're calculating average. Would average always be a round number? No, it wouldn't. So it would be a float. So we'll call that AV. Okay. So grades is an array that holds all the grades. Num grades is the number of grades, and average is the average. All right. What do we need to do in the void setup? Well, we're going to be getting input from the user and we're going to be printing. And so we need to turn on our serial monitor, serial.begin, and we'll run at the old trusty 9600. I don't know why I do that. This will run much faster, but I guess it's a habit. Okay. Now, in the void loop, your task is to average the grades. Well, if you're going to average the grades, what's the first thing that you need? You need the grades. But before you ask the person for the grades, you need to know what? How many grades there are. Otherwise, you don't know how to ask him. Like, how many times do you ask him for a grade? So the first thing you need to know is what? Num grades. All right, so how would we do that? We would ask him for the number of grades. How do we get input from a user? We ask, we wait, and we read. We did that in an earlier lesson. So what do we want to ask? Serial.println, and then in quotes the prompt that we want to give him. How many grades would you? How many grades? That's good enough. And I always like to put a space after the question mark, and that way when they give their response, it doesn't cram it up against that question mark. Okay? Close parentheses. Now, we ask, what do we do now? We wait. How do we wait? While serial.available while serial.available equal 0. Open your clause. So what do? like if we ask him for grades, we've got to give him time to give the response to us. And so what do we do while he's typing? Absolutely nothing. We sit and wait. So while serial.available equals 0, that means while there's no data that he's put in, the data available for us to read, while that's 0, we just sit and wait. So while serial.available equals 0, we sit and wait in this clause. So it's going to just sit there and loop until he inputs something. Now, once he inputs something, what do we want to do? We want to read it. We want to read it into which variable? Av. Okay? Not av. What am I thinking? Okay? We want to read it into numGrade. Numgrades equal what? It's an int. So how do I read an int? Serial dot parse int open close. All right. Now at this point we know how many grades he wants to average. So now we need what? We need to go get those grades from him. If he says he has 3 grades, we need to ask him for a grade how many times? 3 times. If he says he has 17 grades, how many times should we ask him for a grade? 17. That sounds like what programming skill would be useful? The for loop. Okay, so we want to ask him inside of a for loop. So we're going to say for. Well, we're going to need an index. We're going to need a counter in this for loop. So we're going to use I. So I better come back up here and say int I. That's our counter or our index. And so now I can just use I for I equal. Okay, now something that you need to learn. When you have an array, you have the slots numbered. You have the first slot, the second slot, the third slot, the fourth slot, the fifth slot, the sixth slot. Okay, but the first slot is not slot 1. The first slot is slot 0. So if we're going to put numbers into these slots, our for loop needs to start at 0. So we're going to say for I equal 0, okay, to I is less than, how many times do we want to go? Well, we want to go up until numgrades because we want to get numgrades from him. And normally we'd say for I less than or equal to numgrades, and that would go all the way to numgrades. But if we are starting with 0, we want to end one number before numgrades. And think about this. If I have 5 grades, the first one is 0, slot 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we would want to stop at 4. So we would just say less than num grades. All right, so I starts at 0, our counter starts at 0, and then it'll go up to, it'll loop as long as I is less than numgrades. So if numgrades is 5, it'll loop 5 times, but that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we would end at I equal 4, and then I is equal to I plus 1. Okay, open our clause. All right, and then it already has given us our close clause there. All right, inside this loop, what do we want to do? We want to input the grades. How do we input something? How do we get user input? We ask, we wait, we read. Okay, so we're going to say serial.println, please input your grade. Okay, we ask. Now what do? We wait while, what do? Serial.available equal 0, while serial.available equal 0, open clause. What do we do here while we're waiting? Absolutely nothing. We just loop until something shows up on the serial port. Okay, so that is the wait part. And then what do? Read. Now what are we reading? We're reading a grade, a single grade. Okay, so we're going to say grade equal. Did I say grade or grades? Grades. Grades. But remember, this is a special type of variable. I'm going to get a number and I'm going to put it in this bucket, but what do I have to tell it? Which slot to put it in? The variable bucket is labeled grades, but inside the bucket are these slots, and I've got to tell it which slot to go in. Well, we're just going to fill them up in order. So we want the first one to go where? In the first slot, which is slot 0. All right. But if I put 0 here every single time through the loop, it's going to put every number in the first slot, and we're only going to have the last number, and it'll be in the first slot. So the first time through, I want to put it in slot 0, the next time through in slot 1, the next time through in slot 3. It's like we want something that's changing. Well, what's changing? I is changing. Every time through the loop, I starts at 0, I goes up to num grades minus 1, okay? And so I is changing in the for loop. So what slot do I want to put the number in? Grades of I. Because the first time through, it'll put the grade where? In the 0th slot, slot 0. Then the next one, slot 1. Then the next one, slot 2, slot 3, slot 4. Does that make sense? Okay. And then this is a float. So how do we get a float? Serial dot parse float. Okay. Now, that's all there is to it. You just get all the grades. Okay, you just get all the grades. And then when we've got them all, what will happen? It will drop out of this for loop after it has all the grades. Okay? Now, what do we want to do? We want to average them. To average them, what do? We add them all up. Okay? So to add them all up, I need to have another bucket. I need to have another variable that I add all the numbers to. Would that be an array or a simple variable? It would be a simple variable. Okay? And so why don't we call that variable, it's going to be a float, okay? And let's call it sum grades, for the sum of the grades. Okay, so what do we need? We need another for loop. And every time through the for loop, we're going to take one of the numbers out of grades and we're going to add it to the bucket. So we're going to go for I equal 0 to I is less than num grades. And then I is equal to I plus 1. Okay, now open our clause. I'll tell you, I really get confused. Sometimes it adds when I open it, it adds the close there, and so I don't need to add a close clause. All right, what do we want to do in here? We want to go through that array, and we want to take each number and we want to add it. We want to sum it up. So what do we say? Sum grade, did I say grade or grades? Sum grades is equal to what? Well, whatever was in there before plus what? The grades. G-R-A-D-E-S. Okay, but when I use the array, I've got to tell it what? Which slot. Okay? I want to take the number out of slot 0, add it to sum grades. Take the number out of slot 1, add it to sum grades. Take the number out of slot 2, add it to sum grades. So what do I put for the index? I put I. So the first time through, I is 0. It's going to grab the slot. It's going to grab the grade in slot 0. Next time I is 1, it's going to grab the grade in slot 1. Okay, now if I'm going to say sum grades equals sum grades plus grades, I've got to give sum grades a number so it doesn't get upset. So I better up here say empty the bucket, right? Start with sum grades equals 0. Okay? So for I equal 0 to num grades, I is I plus 1. This is going to add all of the numbers together. Now, after I get out of this for loop, SumGrades is going to have the sum of all of the array. Okay, how do I get the average? Average is equal to SumGrades divided by what? SumGrades divided by what? The number of grades. What is that? NumGrades, right? Okay. Now, let's do serial.print, and I'm not doing print line because I just want all this on one line. Serial.print, your average is space, close quotes, and then serial.println, and then I'm going to print what? Av. And then I'm going to do serial.print, and then I'll just print a blank. I should do a print line, println, and then print a blank. Okay, so this is a simple program where we populate an array, we then average all the numbers in the array, and then we print the average. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. Oh my goodness, got an error. For loops use colons. Were you guys screaming at me? Hopefully you saw that. For loops use colons. See, I did it right the first time. Oh my goodness, what is this? Oh, no, I didn't do it right the first time. All right, I hope you guys caught me on that. I do so many different programming languages, I sometimes forget what is what. Why does it not like this? NumGrade, I called it NumGrades up there, so this is NumGrades. NumGrades. Hopefully you guys caught that. NumGrades. All right. It is so embarrassing to make all of these mistakes. Colon at the end of a command line like that. This, my friend, is getting embarrassing. All these mistakes I'm making. Another one, colon. Boom. All right. Getting a little rusty here, but you know, one of the most important things I think you can learn is how to debug your code. And so I don't try to do things perfectly. I just do them, make my mistakes, and hopefully you learn a little bit about debugging code. So to kick this thing off, we will open the serial monitor. Okay, look at that. It asked me how many grades. Let's say 3 grades. Okay, please input your grade. 90. This is going to go into which slot? Slot 0. Okay, please input your grades. Hey, and you guys that are having trouble reading from the serial monitor where it jumps out and the serial.parseFloat or serial.parseInt isn't working, make sure that you have this set at no line ending. If you put one of these other ones, it can generate a problem, so it's good to leave that at no line ending. Okay, second grade is going to be 95, and then the third grade is going to be 100. Your average is 95. Boom! Did you see that? I've got a program that average grades. I just put in 3 grades because I don't want to sit and input grades all day long. But let's try it again. Okay, let's try it again. How many grades? Let's put in 4 grades this time. 4 grades. This time you're going to make a 60. You're going to make a 65 or 64. Okay, you're going to make a 70. And you're going to make a 72. And boom, it says your average is 137.75, and that is what? That's wrong. Something's gone wrong. Okay, you know, let's think about it because I want to help you learn how to debug things. So, you know, this is kind of like a story on arrays, and it's also a story on debugging. Okay. How could the program work the first time and not work the second time? This number is way too big. Okay, the average is way too big. How could something have gone wrong? Well, if average is sum grades divided by num grades, I never changed num grades. So if the average was too big, then sum grades was too big. But it worked the first time. Hey, did you ever think that the first time it worked because why? Sum grades started at 0. But in the program execution, you are executing through the void loop. Okay, you're executing through the void loop. The second time I did the average, I didn't what? I didn't dump out. I didn't empty my sum grades. It's like I didn't throw out the trash. I have a trash can full of the trash from the last problem. I need to dump out or empty sum grades after the first time through. How would I empty out sum grades? Well, here I clean up my mess. After I print out average, I better what? I better set sum grades equal to 0. All right, so let's try that. Man, I'm on a roll. This is going to go now. It's kind of funny. This is the #1 mistake that I see students make on problems like this, is not remembering to clean up after they've gone through the loop one time and then the next time through. Now, I don't need to clean up my grade array because I'm going to put new grades in on top of it. That will take care of itself, but I do need to clean up some grades. So let's try this. Okay. Okay, we are going to say how many grades? We're going to have 3 grades. 90, 90, and 91. Okay, 90, 90, and 91. The average is 90.33. You see, this is another thing I do when I check students when they do a problem like this, is I put in something to make sure that they're doing the grades as a float, because you could have a fractional number for a grade. You could have a 93 point or a 90.33. So I'm making sure that they're using floats. Okay, now let's see if it will run a second time. So we're going to say 3 grades again, and then we're going to say 60, 61, and 65. And boom, the average is 62. Okay, so you see why did it work this time? Because when I went through it the first time, I set the sum grades back to 0. Okay, let's wrap this video up. If you are going to do something where you need to keep track of a list of related numbers, like a list of grades or a list of the amount of money you spent on different items, things like that that are lists, the way you do that is not with a bunch of different variables. You have one variable, grades, that has some number of slots in it. Okay, some number of slots. Here we set 25. That means that you could have up to 25, but you don't have to fill all the slots, right? We did 3 grades or 4 grades or 5 grades or whatever. You don't have to fill them all up. But this is how you declare it. You have to declare grades is a float. That's the type of variable, and it has 25 slots in it. Remember, the first slot is slot 0. The second slot is slot 1. Okay? And a very natural way to interact with an array is with for loops. Start your for loop at 0, and then you can just step through those slots. Okay, man, I hope this makes sense. Leave me a comment below. All right, talk about this. Does this make sense? And hopefully you're beginning to see the real power that you can use if you start using arrays for your for your variables. Like, let's think, what if you had a sensor that was taking temperature measurements? You could put the temperature in an array, and then you could like plot the array, or you could save the array, right? It makes sense to put related numbers in one variable that allows you to save a list of numbers. Okay, this has been kind of a fun lesson. I hope you are enjoying the new things that you're learning. You guys, think about giving me a thumbs up. Always like hearing from you below. Please leave your comments down below. Share this with other people. Paul McWhorter from TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.